Boston Podcast Players is supported by a grant from the Bob Jolly Charitable Trust.
Boston Podcast Players.
The story thus far.
Cast of characters.
Empress of
An
Rome.
entity or demon.
A run-of-the-mill Polish guy in his 40s. Setting.
In a small hut
A
in the city of
long-forgotten
Beijing.
era that lives both in the
Act
past.
1,
We
Scene 1.
create the
possible.
world with the stories we tell about
Act 1,
ourselves.
Scene
Because
2.
Steven, he could
Act
be anywhere,
1,
right?
Scene 3.
Don't give up the ship!
Cannon fire.
Bianca pushes the stop button. The end.
Welcome, everyone, to Boston Podcast Players, Boston's virtual podcast stage for new works by local playwrights. I'm Greg Lamb, the host of the show, and today I'm joined not by a guest host, but by two guests for the price of one. Our featured playwrights today are Melissa Bergstrom and Kate Marple of the Perpetual Visitors Theater Company. Melissa, Kate, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having us.
It's great to be here.
Now, the play we're here to talk about is a documentary play called The Big Work. And unlike any other play we've done, you can go right now and purchase it if you so desire on Amazon and Audible.com. Now, we're going to play an excerpt from the play that you provided. And before we get to listening to the excerpt, is there anything you want to say to help set it up?
I suppose the only thing that I would say is that everything that you're going to hear in the excerpt, and this goes for the entire play as well, they're verbatim words of people we interviewed across the country. We interviewed about 40 people across the country. So you're going to be hearing real words, real stories.
Yeah, and I would just
And
say...
as recreated by actors, right?
Yes, as recreated by actors. And so the play itself was, something that sort of came out of experiences in our own life. Melissa and I were really in this place where we were wondering about the role that work played in our lives. And so we went out and we found 40 people across the U.S. to talk to us about sort of where work fit in their lives and how it shaped their lives. And so those interviews became the play. And so I think the clip that everyone's going to hear is a section of the play called Balance, which is characters, interviewees talking to each other through an imagined conversation about what it does it mean to balance all the parts of your life.
Part 4, Balance.
When I was in 9th grade, I had a pharmacist come in and speak to us about his work experience. He did mention that his work had a 6-figure pay, and I said, awesome, let's start with that. And I knew that the schooling would be a lot less than in other medical fields, so now I am a pharmacist.
Remy from California.
My parents wanted me to pursue something in the medical field. I think being immigrants, they really wanted to push us, their children, to do something and become someone who is respected. But not only that, they want the prestige and the bank account growth that comes with it. So you can't really be a teacher, even though some students may love you, because they knew a teacher wouldn't make a lot of money. When I was in college, I thought to be successful meant you had to have some sort of title. You had to have some sort of power. And power to me meant a lot of money. It meant traveling all the time for work. It really is nothing that I want now looking back on it, but I remember having a really hard time letting go of all of that because it was ingrained in me for so long that that's what success is. Now, success means being able to do a job that I enjoy and feeling like I'm getting the compensation in terms of salary and the other things for the amount of work I put forth. Success is being able to balance what I do for my career with the time I'm able to spend with my family. I think I would feel like I failed more if I put a lot of time into my work, but I don't see my daughter. I don't see my husband. In the grand scheme of things, sending emails out at 11 or midnight, no one's really watching the time I'm sending emails to say, oh my gosh, Remy works so hard.
I have many hats. By trade, I'm actually a theater actor and screenwriter. I'm a volunteer firefighter. My actual day job is an at-home parent.
Jack from Colorado.
When we had a child, it made sense because acting is an everyday job, but not an everyday paying job. And My wife is a university administrator, and she had great insurance. What we were going to pay a nanny was basically my entire paycheck. The stereotype that angers me is that I'm mooching off my wife's job and that I probably sit around playing video games all day. I so wish that was what I did. If that's this job as advertised, then I would really like to renegotiate my contract. There are like these mommy cliques, and they are really condescending. They will say, "So, what else do you do?" And I say, "Well, I'm an at-home parent and a parenting advocate, and I write for the Huffington Post," as a way of saying your condescension is really not appreciated. I've been in 2 fires so far, and it might be the coolest. It's unlike anything I've ever experienced. You get a call, and there's a car fire, or a fire alarm went off, or someone has a stroke, and everyone races to the truck, and you're faced with something different every time, but it's exhilarating. You know, the last thing I thought was that at the age of 43, I'd be applying to be a firefighter, but my attitude has always been just say yes. I never thought I'd be an at-home parent, and I never thought I'd be plugging into organizations that are advocates for active and engaged fathers. Never thought I would do that. And you know, you're sitting in a room with 150 other dads at a convention, and you're thinking, how the heck did I get here? Well, I said yes. I hate to say that you fall into it, but in some respects you kind of do. If you're always open to whatever opportunity might present itself, then all opportunities are available.
Outside of my acting life, I work for a design company.
Megan from Massachusetts.
Anytime that we have a sort of internal meeting that might involve event logistics, coordinating space, I'm in charge of that. I sort of feel like I'm a glorified event planner. Sometimes because I'm the person wearing many hats or doing a lot of grunt work, it might make people think that I don't have an education, which I do. I have a master's degree. I've chosen to do this, and I'm very happy to do it, but I think sometimes I'm looked at as the help. I feel in some ways that I got very lucky. I went to school for fine arts, and I worked everything before this, from waiting tables to bartending to you name it, I did it. I showed up, not really knowing what the job was, and they said to me in an interview, "So, what do you really like to do?" And I got really nervous, and I said, "Well, I'm really an artist." And he said, "Oh, that's totally an asset to us." And I thought, "Oh, crap, I should work here." Nobody has ever said that to me before, that being an artist is an asset. I get to work in a place I can be really creative, and people are really supportive of what I do outside of my day job. And that has made me stay there for as long as I have. I've been there 4 years. I think I've gained some stability in my job, which I never realized at 20 how important that was to me, but when I'm 30, it's really important to me. But also, I work with a group of highly intelligent people who come from a lot of varying backgrounds, and I think because of that, I feel like I learn something unique each day. I feel like I never have been put into a box at work, and I feel incredibly lucky for that. And I am sort of able to learn and discover and ask a lot of big questions.
I work for an organization that identifies and fosters exceptional, gifted children in the United States and really worldwide.
Tim from Maryland.
It's about finding the kids who are going to be tomorrow's movers and shakers and teaching them more. We're also teaching them to be part of greater community. I'm basically on the back end of all this stuff, setting it up. I taught with this organization as a part-time summer employee after my first year at grad school. I got an email from the department graduate secretary that they needed someone to teach a course in cognitive psychology, and that was what I was studying. And I didn't have anything going on at the moment, so I said, sure. In 2011 and 2012, I was trying to finish up my dissertation for my PhD. I was not, for a variety of reasons, not able to finish that, and this organization was a good place for me. I like these people. They are, so to speak, my tribe, and I really started thinking I'd really like to work there full time. I'd honestly be happy to keep being the assistant program manager. The pay is way more than I expected it to be, honestly. I don't think I'd ever want to be a director level. I don't think I'd be good at it. I'm really proud to have the job I do because I worked really hard to get there. What am I most proud of? Oh, absolutely my little family here. I love my wife. I love her like crazy. I think she's really neat. I'm really proud of her. And I love my dog, and I love the way the three of us are together. And I think when I was given the choice to move to Boston with my wife years ago, before she was my wife, and give up the opportunity for my PhD, it sounds cliche, but I chose love over career. And I would make that choice 1,000 times over.
I'm actually a dental student. And obviously the plan is to be a dentist. To run the private practice, to take over the healthcare professional role from a leadership and business standpoint as well.
Omari from Massachusetts.
I was always pushed towards the medicine route. I mean, a lot of kids are, especially as like immigrant families or like coming from third world countries. Growing up, it's just what you're going to do. But at the same time, I wanted more of a flexible lifestyle. I wasn't really a fan of the middle of the night on-call pagers. There are some jobs that make a ton of money. I could have been a surgeon, coming in, coming out, not having a family life, I don't know, traveling around, going crazy. But I mean, I might not have been fine with traveling, and I might not have been happy being a physician. So I kind of found the balance in between. I wouldn't say it's something that I love, but it's something that I enjoy, and it gives me the opportunity to enjoy something else as well.
You know, I don't know if being a pharmacist is really what I wanted to do anymore. But now I have a family to support, and this profession allows me to do that without a lot of challenges. So if I don't think of my being a pharmacist as me pursuing this passionate career, but as a means to make it so that I have other things I enjoy, then it is what it is, right? If I want to pursue art, like now because I have money, I can go take art classes.
I firmly believe that most people can do their jobs in about 3 hours a day. I worked as a temp at Showtime in their marketing and branding department, and every day it was the same. My boss would have breakfast meetings, and then he'd come in around 10, and he'd say, okay, if anyone needs me, let me know. And then he'd go into his office and play Scrabble for a couple of hours. Then he'd have a lunch meeting. Then he'd come back and, maybe meet with some of the people who reported to him. He could have done everything he needed done in 3 hours. But it's all about, there might be a meeting.
My parents were the first generation to kind of pick up everything they had, leave their family behind. It means they had these really high hopes. And my father was an engineer back home, but it's tough to get an education and work full-time at the same time and provide for a family. So my father is a manager of a diner. He's entrapped in that work-sleep cycle since he first came over here. And I mean, it's not just my family. I don't want you to be sympathetic towards just us. A lot of people fall into working in a gas station or working in 7-Eleven. I mean, that's kind of where the immigrant population find themselves. For me, I was fortunate because I had someone providing for me, and now I'm not responsible for that.
My parents never had the opportunity to go to college. So you're not only living out your dream, you're living out someone else's dream who invested a lot of time, money, and hope in you to be so successful. Luckily for me, it worked out where I became a pharmacist. I honestly don't know if I were to become an artist, that they would have fully supported it.
My grandfather was an immigrant, and he grew up in the Depression. And I know that it's really difficult for him to wrap his mind around the fact that I studied art in school. He thinks I should have gone to law school and that it's about money and being really stable. And I think even for my parents' generation, but especially for ours, we started focusing on the things that we loved, maybe. For me, the American dream is finding something that I love completely and being able to be successful enough at that to make a living.
For me, I think it's about having work to pay the bills, pay my student debt, and that maybe someday allows me to buy a new car. That would be kind of neat. Right now, I have an old Lincoln Town Car.
My wife and I both made a decision a long time ago that we would never define ourselves by the things we have. When we bought a home, people were like, "My God, you could get such a bigger home." And we're like, "Why? There are 3 of us and 2 of us sleep in the same room. So why do I need a bigger home?" But we have family that are like, "Oh, we're moving into another home with 6 bedrooms." And I'm like, "What's wrong with you? Are you going to open a bed and breakfast?" It's quite liberating to get past the notion of the American dream as owning certain things, because you get to just enjoy each moment.
Success? Like the cliche definition or real definition? So the cliche definition would be doing something that makes you happy. But in college, I found that some people that were doing what they loved were not always happy, whether that meant the income is low, or they were not able to provide for their family, whether that means finding a job in the market, unemployment. So one professor once told me, draw a line. Happiness is on one end and money is at the other. Now go find something in between.
I used to think if I had tons and tons of leisure time, that's how I would measure my happiness in life. And it turns out that just made me bored. I watched all of Dexter. I think I watched 5.5 seasons of Supernatural. That's not even a good show. And for a time, I dabbled in being borderline an alcoholic, but it didn't make me happy. I guess my point is that I realized I want work to devote my time and my life to. Work matters a lot more than a lazy guy thinks it would.
It's also maybe being realistic too. You know, I can say I want to be this actor and do all these things and go to all these auditions. But at the end of the day, I also want a relationship that's successful. And maybe a family one day. And I don't know if those things correspond. Like, I don't know how to weigh them out or what means more to me at this time in my life.
What am I most proud of? I'd have to say my child. Because with me at home, with Dad at home, we've somehow managed to raise a child that is inquisitive and sensitive and compassionate and, knows all the words to Into the Woods. I think he is the thing I'm most proud of.
I really love to teach. My favorite thing is to work with interesting students. If there were ever an opportunity to teach at an institution where I could have an apartment, where my wife and our dog could come with me, a school that has housing on campus, a cafeteria, academic and social spaces, what I really am looking for is Hogwarts without the magic. It doesn't exist. But I really like where I am right now. And there's no way that having a PhD would make me as happy as having my little family here.
As Muslims, we are required to pray 5 times a day. In Egypt, there is a mosque pretty much on every corner. So you can get up, go to a mosque, pray, and then you go back and do your thing. Here, every Muslim has to sneak in somewhere to pray. Behind the lockers in our lab is where I was praying. A girl came by and she's like, "Hey!" And I'm in the middle of my prayer. And obviously, I can't respond. When I didn't respond, she's like, "Ooh, I'm so sorry." And she walked away. So then afterwards, I started laughing. I was like, this is what it means to be a Muslim right now. For me, it's important for everyone to feel welcome in my practice. Whether that means creating a prayer area, or whether that means I have someone from different background or different faiths working with me in the practice to give them that opportunity.
A lot of people have a lot of opinions about what you should and shouldn't be doing. And while some of those things should be taken into consideration, don't feel like you don't have a choice in what you want to do or what you should think. I hear about a lot of people whose parents want them to be a certain person, a certain profession, and they feel really forced, like that's the only choice that they have. But just realize that not everyone's opinion matters.
When I was younger, I thought I have this dream, I have this goal. When the shape of that dream changed for me, I felt really guilty about it. And I didn't understand that it was okay that that dream had changed shape. And it sort of took somebody saying to me, if you have the same dream at 16 that you do at 30, then you might have a problem. You might not have grown at all. I think that's sometimes sort of lost on people. We need to get better at forgiving ourselves and allowing ourselves sort of like change.
Welcome back. I'm here with Melissa and Kate, and we're here to discuss the big work, the portion of which you just heard. Now, in the beginning of the play, you talk about what a landmine, the small talk question is of, so what do you do?
Yeah.
So when you're unsure about how you feel about what you do yourself. So when you're meeting people, what is your small talk opener?
I have to say, working on this play made me aware of how much, two things, how much I dislike the question, what do you do, but how much I used it. And so it's one thing to not want to ask folks that when you meet them, but it took me a while to come up with an alternate question. And I think mine right now is, what's new and interesting that's going on in your life right now? I want to hear about it. And for me, that gives people the option to talk about their job. If that's something that, is really nourishing for them, it gives them the opportunity to talk about their family, to talk about a 5K race they ran. It just leaves it open for them to decide what it is they want to share.
Yeah, and I would just say that we kind of went through an evolution in hearing these interviews and writing the play, because I think our initial instinct was that there should be a different question you could ask about a different aspect of someone's life. But there were people we interviewed who loved talking about their work. And so it was that moment of like, oh, you don't want to close down the connection or the opportunity for someone to celebrate whatever it is they want to celebrate in their life, whether it's their family or whether it's their job or whether it's a hobby. And so I've moved very similar to just saying something like, what do you love to do? Or, what are you excited about
And
right
in the
now?
play, when it comes up, you're surprised whenever someone has uncomplicated relationship with their work, right?
Yeah,
there'll be right behind the scene moments, and there was one especially for me. I did an interview that lasted 15 minutes, and I had just come off of, there were 13 questions. We asked everyone, we asked identical questions to all the interviewees. And my first 3 interviews lasted like 3 hours. Like people were going down the rabbit hole with me, of just like all of these complicated feelings they have about how they're seen because of their job and how people value them and what does it mean. And I went and did this interview with this gentleman, and it was 15 minutes, and he was so unburdened by these questions.
It's like, 2-word answers for everything.
2-word answers. And I called Melissa because I was like, do you think he doesn't trust me? Do you think he's uncomfortable in the interview? And we had this beautiful moment where she was just like, I just think some people don't struggle with this. And I don't know, it felt like simple and world-changing because
Something you never considered.
I had been struggling with it. And so like, how could everyone not be struggling with this?
Right. And I think that it ties back to what you just said about coming up with questions to ask people that don't shut down the idea, that don't necessarily take away someone's option to say, this is what I do for my job and I enjoy it.
I love it.
And I'm not wrestling with it. So it was a pivotal moment, I think, for both of us.
Now, even though this play is about people and their conflicted relationship with their work, I'm going to do my best to resist the very real temptation to treat this as a stealth therapy session. But please let me know if I fall short. Can you talk about the history of the play and how you thought up the idea and how you put it together?
Sure. Well, Kate and I are both artists with day jobs, and we've been that way for a long time. And I think for us, it's probably around 2014, late 2014. Both of us at the same time just kind of, I remember like having lunch or something and sitting across from each other and saying, gosh, what do you say when people ask you that question? What do you do? Because for me, as someone that has, acted, directed, taught, has been a writer for a really long time, for someone to ask me, what do you do? It's kind of like, well, what time of day? Can I tell you that I'm an actor and a writer? Or if I tell you that, are you going to ask where I've done that recently or if I've gotten paid? So the question just felt so fraught in terms of my own identity, and was I lying about something, or how authentic was I being? But at the same time, just saying to someone, well, I'm doing some admin work right now, it didn't really feel like it opened up the door to any more connection. We didn't really continue the conversation after that. And I know, Kate, you had similar feelings about that question as well.
Yeah, and both from the artist perspective, but also from it, and I talk about this in the play because Melissa and I write ourselves in as narrators to the show. But I also was coming off a really prolonged period of illness, where sort of my coping mechanism was to just like put my head down and like work a lot, right? That was sort of, it had kind of taken over my identity in a way that I was in a spot where I was trying to redefine my life by all these other things I was doing. And I was running up to every time I met someone new, they'd ask me what I did for a living. And I just found myself getting so annoyed because I was like, I just took a great vacation. Or like, I'm tango dancing. Like, don't ask me about work. It's a sensitive topic right now. And so we both just had these, like, as Melissa always says, like big feelings about it. And then just in talking with people in our lives, you know, talking about people who were older in the workforce and feeling like they were getting pushed out of feeling valuable in their jobs. And like just people at all different stages in our lives that we just said, okay, what would it look like to go out and just talk to anybody who will talk to us about this?
Right.
And you recruited all these people from different walks of life. Soldiers, farmers, nannies, actors, teachers, scientists, unemployed.
Yeah.
And how did you track them down? You just
it was kind of starting. I always talk about it like the metaphor of like dropping a stone into the river. Like you kind of start, the first little circles are your own communities that you know and the people in your life that you know. So I feel like when you're working on a documentary play, it's kind of canvassing everyone that you possibly know and saying, hey, we're doing something about this. Do you know anyone that would want to talk to us? And having the word spread that way. So we did that for a little while, and we got some folks that definitely were willing to share their stories. And then it became clear that we were hearing incredible stories, really meaningful things that people were sharing, but there was some stories that felt like they were missing. And so that's when we really started to target different professions. Like I come from a family of farmers. Like my uncles were farmers, my grandfather was farmer. Like everybody going back for as far as I can research my family history are farmers. And we didn't have that voice in the play. So we actually, that was an example of going onto the meetup group site and searching farm meetup groups and finding a very small Midwestern meetup group. And then we emailed them about it. So that's just one example of kind of how nuanced it got when we were really seeking out voices that we knew we wanted to.
Yeah. But funny enough, Meetup became a big tool for that. I think I did eventually actually get banned.
You did?
I got officially banned from Meetup because technically asking people for interviews to Meetup is against the policy. But I got one of my favorite interviews of the show. The aerospace engineer, Sophia, came through through a Muslim American Meetup group.
Wow.
And so I regret nothing. I wear my band like a badge of honor. But yeah, it became like we have to ask ourselves, where do people with the voice we're missing gather?
Right.
And then how do we ask them and explain this project to them? And to your question of like, how did it all get kind of put together? We knew when we had finished the interviews, we had like 130,000 words in transcripts. We typed verbatim the transcripts. Right. And we were looking at it with like, this is amazing. We have like 10 plays in here and we have no idea what our actual play is. So we started throwing out, is this about gender in the workplace? Is this about the stage of life you're in the workplace? Is it like, we couldn't come up with what that thing was that kind of formed the scenes. Mm-hmm. And it was on a subway ride home one night after a very terrible writing session that Melissa just said, I think everybody struggles with one thing more than everything else. If we could just figure out what the one thing was. And the qualitative researcher in my brain, I did some of that work in grad school, kind of went off and I said, okay, let's code the interviews. Let's each take them all home and you can only write in one word what you think that person in that interview is struggling with in their job. Mm-hmm. And that's how the scenes of the play got formed, which are expectations, self-determination, legacy, and balance. Because those were the 4 things that people were talking about.
Was there anything, aside from the person who just spoke in 2 words at a time, any response that surprised you most memorably?
Wow, there's so many. I think that's one of my favorite parts about writing and creating a documentary play is that people just blow your expectations out of the water. I think that the interview that sticks with me the most that I did was a young Muslim American dental student in the play Omari. And we'd received the email back from him. We had reached out to some different local college and university groups, Muslim American community groups, and got the response back almost immediately saying, I would be honored to share my story with you. Please, let's set up a time. This is so great. And we got to the interview and we started to talk. And I remember feeling really hesitant to ask him very pointedly about his perception or experience in the workplace as a Muslim American. We talked about other things first. And he stopped in the middle of the interview and he just looked at me and he said, this is all great and I'm happy to keep chatting along this route if you want, but your email said that you wanted to talk about the Muslim American perspective. And I just want to let you know, you can ask me any questions you want. Like, that's okay. We can totally talk about it openly. And it was like we both just exhaled. And I was like, oh, okay. And we got into some of those nuances and some of those feelings about that. And that was just something, I think that was maybe more of a surprise for me as an interviewer in that process of really learning to get comfortable in those moments that feel a little uncomfortable. I think that Kate and I with this work, we really want to get past the identities that people usually have for themselves or that people have for other people. So I think that's maybe why it felt a little strange to say, I want to ask you about this from this perspective, but that was so meaningful for him and it was so valuable to hear. And then at the end of the interview, he said, oh, this is so exciting. So when does this go into theaters? Like, when is this going to be on screen? And I kind of laughed and I said, oh my goodness, oh, this is a play. And totally earnestly, he said, oh, wait, so this is going to be on stage, like real people on stage. That is so cool. And it like my heart just felt so grateful at that moment, realizing that this person had just been so generous with their story and hadn't even totally at the same time
what was going on.
Yeah, and just the idea that, well, but you want to hear my story, and I'd love to share that with you.
Yeah, I think too, to the element of like what surprised us. I think, when we were trying to blanket for different voices, it wasn't just about what's the actual job you do or what's your geography or what's your demographic, but it was also about wanting to make sure we didn't wrap up interviews till we had heard from people who loved their job, hated their job, like all the variances of relationships to work. And I think I can speak for Melissa on this too, because we talked about it. We had a lot of conversations about who that might look like. Like, I think we were at one point saying, like, the person who's going to love their job is going to be some, like, 40-year-old financial advisor, somebody who was like a workaholic in that sense. I didn't expect it to be like a 26-year-old aerospace engineer who was late to our interview because she was shooting off her own rockets somewhere and got one stuck in a guy's tree and then literally had to chop his tree down to get her rocket back. And like, that's why she was late to the interview. And it was magical, right? And she was in love with her job and couldn't stop, did not want to branch into any other area of her life during the interview. Or I think we, just from having talked to people in our own lives, we're expecting to hear that the voice of feeling marginalized in the workforce coming from someone who was older, but found that the people over 70 or over 65 who we interviewed were full of energy about their work. And that really feeling marginalized voice actually came from someone in their 30s who was not unemployed, but underemployed,
right,
and had been for so long. So we got to all the voices we wanted to hear, but we found them in places maybe we weren't expecting to hear them.
So now, being a playwright myself, I'm used to developing plays in writing groups and workshops and sending out plays to contests and other opportunities. Is it different when you're doing a documentary play? Are there things that you can do because of the nature of that and things that you can't do?
I think that this process has been interesting for us as playwrights in terms of, kind of like getting that feedback and sharing it. The first performance that we did was in March of 2016, and it was at the Outpost in Inman Square, which is typically like a music, kind of chamber music art space. And I think, I don't want to speak for you, Kate, but I think for me, when we did that, I was like, oh, we've come to the end of this road with this. Like, this was just a huge undertaking, and we did it, and we want to share it, and we're so proud of it. And then I remember kind of packing up that show and having someone that came to that audience invite us up to perform in Newburyport the following fall.
Okay.
And thinking, ooh, you know what? If we do it again, we started to have these conversations, if we do it again, there was that audience comment that they really resonated with this part. Maybe we can kind of like elevate that part a little bit and let something else fall away. And so what started, I think, is like we have a finished product really became, that was really in a sense a workshop performance, a true workshop performance in the sense that we wanted to hear that feedback. And our cast helped us so much, I think, with some of those insights. And for me, I think that they, like when you hear the recording of the audio play, I just feel like their fingerprints are all over that as well in terms of what they brought to the characters and even some of the feedback for the text.
Yeah, absolutely. The final two scenes are in a different order than they were originally written because one of our actors, Teddy Crecelius, said to us, I don't know if you're open to this note, but balance is actually the end of your play. Not legacy. And I was like, we just kind of looked at each other and it was the most obvious comment in the world that it was almost like, I can't believe we haven't thought of this. To your question, I don't know, I can't speak to what the process and the goals and objectives of other documentary playwrights is and how their vision of whether it's sending it to festivals or workshopping their work in a specific way. I think what Melissa and I have come to throughout this process is understanding how we want our own work to be used. And that is really our only like guidepost in this, which is have a lot of feelings about theater being a place where people usually come instead of theater being something you bring to people. And so as we've been like workshopping this, I think, and working on our plays, it's all about who needs to hear this? Mm-hmm. Where are they? Where can we take it to them? As opposed to it's trying to think of like, okay, what's the final staging of this, and what stage is that, and what, like, how much prestige is attached to that. We've taken this play a bunch of places now. We've done it in a comedy club. We've done it in a small community venue. We're about to embark on, maybe Melissa wants to talk about this. We're about to embark on actually using it as a workshop.
Yeah, a workshop with an organization in Massachusetts that does career training and career counseling for adults in all different stages of their work. So I think for us, the process throughout it's exactly what Kate said. I mean, the play has changed and we've wanted to get it to a point where we've been able to say, okay, this is the copy people can purchase. This is the copy people can listen to. But it's also about keeping it nimble enough and flexible enough and being able to kind of think outside of the box of what it can do and what can happen.
How these stories can forge connection and now listen, if a large theater wants to like put on big work, are we going to ever say like, no, like please, we don't want to see it
because every other playwright I've talked to was like, concerned about, I need to get the play with this company and then they'll do it. But do you have your own company, Perpetual Visitor, which I don't know if it was set up as a container for the play or if the company came first and then the play, but it seems married pretty much.
It is at the moment. I mean, we're doing other projects now, but it honestly started like this. We want to write a play. We should probably perform it somewhere if we're going to write it. And it was like, but, we want to just keep control over how that's going to happen. We want to just do it the way we want to do it. Well, we'll just rent some space and we'll do it. Oh, they want some insurance. That's fine. Okay, we'll get some insurance. Oh, they won't give us insurance. We have to have a company for insurance. All right, well, we'll have a company. Oh my gosh, we have to have an accountant and an LLC and like all of this stuff. But I mean, it sort of started at that direction, but it's also been really great because now as we do other projects, it allows us to go and do workshops. It allows us to go, we're working on a new play. It just, over time, we're going to do more. But we're not a theater company we're not a traditional theater company in the sense of like, we don't plan a season. Yeah. No, it's not only ever going to be about big work. It's going to be about a host of other stuff, but it is a mechanism for us to produce work in the documentary realm that we believe in, and then also to produce that in whatever way that makes sense, whether it's workshop readings, community readings. And again, if we could get it on a big stage and that ever happens, I mean, fantastic. We would certainly never say no to that. Is it what gets us up in the morning and keeps us writing?
Probably not.
Probably not. Yeah.
Do you know what you'll say if someone contacts you and says, hey, we have this theater in Seattle and we heard about your play and we'd like to produce it. We'll pay you this much money and we'll get actors and we'll have this actress play you and this actor, because you gender swap freely when you do this, play you. Is that ever crossed your mind?
It's funny. I think because that hasn't been like kind of like the big like end goal. I can't. It's not that I have strong feelings either way. I think it would just be like, for me, I don't want to speak for you, but it would be like it's more of conversations of like, what do you want to do with this play? You know, like first thing that comes to my mind is like, wow, that's so fantastic. A wider audience gets to see it. And can we do some talkbacks afterwards? Can we do like some group sessions afterwards? To just make sure that like kind of the spirit of like inquiry and curiosity and connection are still present.
I think that's exactly right. I would be so open to other theater companies wanting to stage it and put it on, and for their vision for it and however they wanted to cast it and do it. It's more of like, we even talked about this when we cast actors. We're much more about why than what. So it's like, we wanted to cast actors who were passionate about this material and had opinions about the material, who could also act. Not really great actors who also thought the material was okay. Mm-hmm. And so if I think about another theater company doing it, you can have a different vision, like you can put it on in any way. But I just want to know that like at the core base of why you're doing this is that there's some sort of conversational aspect to community building around it. And if that were the case, I mean, alongside producing it as an audio drama and like an original cast production, we did also publish the actual play itself. Yeah, we published the script itself. It's out there. It's also on Amazon. So yeah, I mean, it's out there.
Yeah.
So I noticed when preparing for this interview that you guys are in the process of joining the ranks of podcasters with a show called Identity Tales. The preview is now up as we record in March. The actual episode will air some nebulous date in the future.
April 17th.
Well, yours has a real date.
This
episode we're recording now.
They'll be able to go back and listen to season 1.
Yeah. So can you tell us about Identity Tales?
Yeah. So I love this process of documentary playwriting. I love everything about the process of how Big Work came to be. And it was like a year and a half of interviews going to first workshops. And so it's a really long lead time. And there were so many smaller documentary type stories or moments of visiting. So we call ourselves the Perpetual Visitors Theater Company because we talk about the fact that somewhere in each of our lives, we feel like a visitor. We feel like something that makes us who we are also makes it hard to belong. And we're really obsessed with those stories. And so it just kind of came to be that I had a list of all these topics that I wanted to interview people about being a visitor, about the things that make them who they are, that kind of sometimes impede belonging. And so, so the first season comes out April 17th. There are 6 episodes in this first season. We're talking, the very first episode is with a musician from Berkeley who was falling in love with the guitar at the same time that he was losing his vision. And so we sort of take his musical journey in the first episode. There's an episode with a male breast cancer survivor and what is it like to carve out space for recovery in a disease that's been branded pink. So they're just kind of, every episode follows one human's journey. And it's a way to sort of bring some of these stories of visiting that maybe we're never going to flesh out into a full play, but that really sort of mesh with the mission of our company and just kind of go that direction. I also just love the audio medium. I think recording Big Work as an audio play was solidifying for me that I just love the audio medium.
And one thing I hope that happens is that people who listen to this podcast and listen to all these interviews I'm doing and to the plays actually look into working with the featured playwrights. I'm not sure that's happened yet, but I remain hopeful that it will. Mm-hmm. That being said, what is the phone call or email that you'd like to get from someone listening to this podcast out in the world?
Ooh, I have to say it's very similar to the email that we got recently from this career training organization, which was I heard about your work through a friend of a friend, and it sounds really different than anything I've ever seen. I want to work together. I don't know how, but let's talk about how your brand of theater can help the people that I'm working with understand themselves better, connect with each other in a deeper way, and create this vision for the future that feels really dynamic. And that was pretty much literally the email and the phone call that we had with someone very recently. And it was just, I loved it because I think, as Kate said before, we kind of traditionally think of theater as like this place that you go to and you bring yourself to this play. But what happens when the play kind of reaches all of its different arms out to you in the way that you need it, in the way that you need to hear it at this time in your life?
I don't think I could have a better answer than that. I was gonna ask you, Mel, is there an email you'd want to get about this new project that we're working on?
Do you want to talk about the new project?
Yeah, I think so. We are currently in the research and interview phase for our next full-length documentary play about artificial intelligence. So I think everybody has probably noticed in the last couple of years, the subject of artificial intelligence has just popped up more and more and more in the media. We're engaging with it every single day, even if we don't realize we are. And there's a lot of questions, I think, to be asked about what it means to be human. What does this interaction look like? Where are we going? How is this going to affect, the economy, our relationships with each other? I'm really interested in the thread with the arts and technology. So I think a really cool email to get for that would be like an institution or an organization that's science-based that says, hey, I heard you're creating this play about artificial intelligence. We'd love to partner with you for that and see what that looks like. Because again, I think it's like asking what new iterations of theater are possible. So if it would be possible for us not to write this in a vacuum, but to actually partner with a science-based organization, nonprofit company, just to intersect in that way, I think that would be really cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
It does sound, it sounds like unlike anything I've encountered as a playwright. So I'm glad someone's doing it.
Well, yeah, and I think we all have this very specific, the research for it so far has been so fascinating that I think we all have this like sci-fi image that, the thing to fear is that artificial intelligence will be, rise up against us.
Robots.
But it's so interesting to conduct these interviews because the conversations all have been about, with the experts and the research we're doing, has all been actually about how are people going to use this? Like, what's the bias in how it's being programmed? Is it going to, if you're trying to recognize it to do something, is it only going to recognize male faces? Is it only going to recognize white faces? What does that mean? How is it being used in all of these different ways? And then on the flip side, it's not just experts. We're talking to people just again, sort of with big work, like everyday people.
Hobbyists.
How are you interacting with this? How is it changing your life? And I think at the heart of it is a question of what does it mean to be human in an age when so much is going by the way of technology and artificial intelligence.
I look forward to seeing that pop up at some point. Now, for people who want to learn more about you, I imagine your website's the best place to go.
It is. Perpetual Visitors
Theater.
.org, I believe.
Yes, let's say that all at perpetualvisitorstheater.org.
All right.
You can find information about Big Work there, links to buy the script and the audio play, and you can keep posted on Identity Tales and everything to come.
Identity Tales is actually already up on Apple Podcast, Google Play, so wherever you find your...
Wherever you're listening to this podcast.
That's right, you can find Identity Tales, yes. And by the time you're hearing this, season 1 will already all be up.
Melissa and Kate, thank you very much for sharing your work with us.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you.
The Big Work was written by Melissa Bergstrom and Kate Marple. The play was read by Melissa Bergstrom, Christa Brown, Teddy Crecelius, Emily Duggan, Kate Marple, and Sunit Sharma. Special thanks to the Perpetual Visitors Theater Company for providing the excerpt. Follow us on Twitter at BossPodPlay and on Facebook. Please rate us on iTunes or your podcast player of choice. You can support us on Patreon at BossPodPlay. Our theme was composed by Thomas Deus, thomasdeusmusic.com. Additional music by bensound.com. Other than yourself, do you know of a Boston area playwright who you'd like to be featured on the show? Let us know at bosspodplay@gmail.com.